Christmas Eve, 1945. A family of 11 goes to sleep in their home in Fayetteville, West Virginia. At 1 a.m., the house catches fire. The parents escape. 4 of the children escape. 5 children do not. And when investigators sifted through the ashes the next morning, they found nothing. No bones, no teeth, no remains of any kind. 5 children, aged 5 to 14, had simply ceased to exist. The fire marshal ruled it an accident. Case closed, move on. But the parents, George and Jenny Sodder, refused. Because here is what nobody could explain. The family's phone line had been cut before the fire started. The children's bodies were never found, in a fire that didn't burn hot enough to destroy human remains. And 20 years later, a photograph arrived in the mail of a young man who looked exactly like one of the missing children. Aged 20 years, no return address, no explanation, just the photograph. And on the back, 4 words. I'll tell you what those words were before this video is over. Stay with me until the end, because the evidence I'm going to walk you through doesn't just suggest the official story is wrong. It dismantles it completely, piece by piece. Subscribe if you're new. We tell the stories that were buried on purpose. Now, let's go back to West Virginia, Christmas Eve, 1945, and a family that was about to lose everything in a fire that should never have been called an accident. To understand what happened to the Sodder children, you first have to understand who the Sodder family was. George Sodder was an Italian immigrant who had come to America in the early 1900s. He built a life in Fayetteville, a trucking business, a home, a family. He and his wife Jenny had 10 children together. 10. By Christmas 1945, 9 of those children were still living at home. George was, by every account, a proud, outspoken man. He was particularly vocal about his politics, specifically his opposition to Benito Mussolini and Italian fascism. In a small town in 1945, with a significant Italian immigrant community, that kind of outspokenness made enemies, and this matters. Because in the weeks before Christmas 1945, George Sodder received a threat. A man came to his property, looked at the house, looked at George, and said, "Your house is going to go up in flames, and your children are going to be destroyed." George reported it. Nothing was done. 6 weeks later, on Christmas Eve, his house burned. At approximately 12:30 a.m. on December 25, 1945, Jenny Sodder was woken by the telephone ringing. She answered. A woman on the other end asked for someone who didn't live there. Wrong number. Jenny noticed the lights were still on downstairs. She noticed the curtain door to the staircase was open. She went back to bed. At 1 a.m., she smelled smoke. The house was on fire. George and Jenny and 4 of their children escaped through the ground floor. But 5 of the children, Maurice, age 14, Martha, age 12, Louis, age 9, Jenny, age 8, Betty, age 5, were upstairs. George tried to go back in. The flames drove him back. He ran outside to get his truck, planning to drive it under the upstairs window and climb up to reach them. The truck wouldn't start. It had been running perfectly the day before. He tried to use the ladder that was always kept on the side of the house. It was gone. He tried to find a phone to call the fire department. The line was dead. He grabbed a barrel of water from the property, threw it on the flames. It had almost no effect. In desperation, he and his son tried to climb the side of the house with their bare hands. The fire was too intense. By the time the fire department arrived, almost 8 hours after the fire was first reported, the house was gone. And so were the children. Now here is where the official story begins to collapse. When investigators examined the remains of the Sodder house, they found almost nothing. And I want to be very precise here, because this is the detail that changes everything. A house fire, even an extremely hot one, does not destroy human remains. Bone is extraordinarily resistant to fire. Teeth are virtually indestructible. Even cremation, which burns at over 1400 degrees Fahrenheit for several hours, leaves significant bone fragments behind. The Sodder house fire burned for approximately 45 minutes, at a temperature investigators estimated was nowhere near 1400 degrees. A fire that size, at that temperature for that duration, cannot destroy 5 human bodies. It is physically impossible. So where were the remains? The fire marshal ruled it an accident anyway. Stated the children had perished in the fire. No remains were presented. No evidence of remains was documented. No further investigation was ordered. The Sodders never accepted that, and the more they looked, the more they found. George and Jenny Sodder spent the rest of their lives investigating what happened to their children. And what they found, piece by piece, built a case that law enforcement refused to take seriously. Evidence point 1, the telephone line. When investigators examined the remains of the Sodder property, they found the telephone line had not burned through. It had been cut, cleanly. Before the fire started, someone cut the phone line before the house caught fire. Evidence point 2, the truck. George's truck refused to start the night of the fire, despite running perfectly the day before, when a mechanic examined it afterward. He found the fuel supply line had been disconnected. Someone had tampered with it. Evidence point 3, the ladder. The ladder George kept on the side of the house, which he might have used to reach the upstairs window, was missing from its usual place. It was later found thrown into a bush approximately 40 feet from the house. Evidence point 4, the fire department. The Fayetteville Fire Department did not arrive until nearly 8 a.m., almost 8 hours after the fire began. Their official explanation for the delay was that they had been at another fire that night. Records of that other fire are either missing or have never been produced. Evidence point 5, and this is the one that investigators should never have let go. A witness. A woman named Mrs. Sawyer reported seeing a man in a car parked near the Sodder property on the night of the fire. She said the man appeared to be watching the house. She reported it. The report went nowhere. In the weeks and months after the fire, the Sodders began receiving reports. People had seen the children, or people who looked like the children. A woman who ran a tourist camp in Addison County reported that, on Christmas morning, a man had checked in with 5 children who matched the Sodder children's descriptions. She said the children appeared frightened, that the man would not let them speak to her, that when she tried to engage them, he moved them away quickly. She didn't report it immediately because she didn't know yet about the fire. By the time she did, the trail was cold. Another report came from a woman in Charleston, West Virginia, who said she had seen 2 of the Sodder girls in a hotel lobby, accompanied by 2 adults. She described the girls as appearing distressed. The Sodders investigated every report. They hired private investigators. They put up billboards. For years, a billboard stood on Route 16 outside Fayetteville, with photographs of the 5 children and a reward for information. George and Jenny never took it down. And then, in 1967, something arrived in the mail that changed everything. It was 1967, 22 years after the fire. Jenny Sodder opened her mail. Inside an unmarked envelope, a photograph of a young man, dark hair, strong jaw, approximately 24 to 26 years old. Jenny Sodder recognized him immediately, or believed she did. He looked like her son Louis, aged 22 years. The photograph had no return address, no letter, no explanation, just the photograph, and on the back, 4 words: Louis Sodder, I love brother. That was it. 4 words, written in a hand that was never identified. Jenny brought the photograph to investigators. She brought it to journalists. She showed it to everyone who had known Louis as a child. Several people who had known Louis said the resemblance was striking. The photograph was analyzed. It appeared to be genuine, not a manipulation, not a prank. A private investigator was hired to trace it. The investigator traveled to Florida, following a lead that suggested the photograph may have originated there. He was never heard from again. The private investigator, hired to find the Sodder children, simply disappeared. The photograph has never been explained. The handwriting has never been matched. And Louis Sodder, if he is alive, has never come forward. In the decades since the fire, researchers, journalists, and investigators have developed several theories about what happened to the Sodder children. Let me walk you through the most credible ones. Theory 1. The mob connection. George Sodder had made enemies, not just through his political outspokenness, but through his business. In the 1940s, the trucking industry in West Virginia was heavily connected to organized crime. George had refused to pay protection money. He had refused to work with certain operators. He had, by multiple accounts, made it publicly known that he would not be intimidated. The threat made on his property 6 weeks before the fire: "Your house is going to go up in flames, and your children are going to be destroyed," was consistent with an organized crime warning. Investigators who have studied the case believe it is possible the fire was set deliberately. The children were taken, not killed, as leverage or punishment, and the official ruling of accidental death was either corrupted or inadequate. Theory 2. The fascist connection. George Sodder's outspoken opposition to Italian fascism drew a specific kind of attention in a community with strong ties to Italy. Several researchers have suggested that the threat made on his property was connected to pro-fascist elements within the local Italian community, who viewed his public statements as an embarrassment and a threat. The timing, December 1945, just months after the end of World War II, was a period of significant tension within Italian immigrant communities across America. Theory 3. The children survived. This is the theory the Sodders themselves believed. The evidence is compelling. No remains. Cut phone line. Tampered truck. Missing ladder. Witness sightings. The photograph. The private investigator who disappeared. George Sodder died in 1969, still believing his children were alive. Jenny Sodder died in 1989, 44 years after the fire, still believing the same. She was buried with the photograph, the one that arrived in the mail, the one that said, "Louis Sodder. I love, brother." She took it with her because it was the closest thing she had to proof that her son had survived. In 1949, 4 years after the fire, workers excavating the basement of the Sodder property found something. A heart, or what appeared to be a heart, preserved in a container buried in the basement. The Sodders were told it was the remains of one of the children. A proper burial was arranged, but here is what investigators found when the organ was later professionally examined. It was not a child's heart. It was beef liver. Someone had buried a piece of beef liver in the basement of the Sodder home and told the family it was their child. Who buried it? Why? Was it an attempt to close the case permanently? To give the family something to bury and move on? The Sodder children's case was never formally reopened by West Virginia authorities. It remains, officially, closed. The Sodder case has never been officially reinvestigated. The state of West Virginia has maintained the original ruling: accidental fire, all 5 children presumed dead. The surviving Sodder children, the 4 who escaped that night, have spent their lives advocating for answers. Their sister Sylvia, who was 2 years old on the night of the fire, too young to remember it, has been the most vocal. In a 2012 interview, she said, "The questions have never gone away. My parents went to their graves without answers. I don't intend to do the same." She has continued pushing for a formal reinvestigation. She has continued analyzing the photograph. She has continued following every lead. As of today, no new investigation has been opened. No explanation for the missing remains has been officially provided. No one has ever been charged. The billboard that George and Jenny put up on Route 16 stood for decades. It read, "What happened to our 5 children?" It is one of the most haunting sentences in American crime history, because it was written by parents who already knew the official answer and didn't believe a word of it. Here is the detail I cannot move past: the beef liver. Someone, after the fire, after the investigation, after 5 children had been declared dead with no physical evidence, someone went to that property, dug a hole in the basement, and buried a piece of beef liver in a container. and then told a grieving family it was the heart of their child. Think about what it takes to do that. Think about what you would need to be hiding to do something like that. You don't bury false evidence unless there is true evidence you're trying to replace. You don't close a case this fast, this completely, with this little physical evidence, unless someone wanted it closed. The Sodder children were real. Maurice, Martha, Louis, Jenny, Betty. They were real children who existed, who were loved, who went to bed on Christmas Eve in their family home and were never seen again, whether they died in that fire or were taken from it. They deserved better than what the state of West Virginia gave them, and their family deserved the truth. They never got it. If you know anything, if your family has ever mentioned this case, this area, these names, the Sodder family's surviving members are still looking for answers. Please use the tip information linked in the description below. For George, for Jenny, for Maurice, Martha, Louis, Jenny, and Betty. If this story did to you what it did to me, that specific kind of anger that comes from a case that was simply allowed to stay unsolved, drop a comment. Tell me, do you believe the children died in the fire? Or were they taken? Comment fire or taken. I read every one. Subscribe if you're new.